People who have survived school shootings, what was it like? I was at UCLA during the shooting in 2016. It was only a disgruntled grad student shooting his advisor and then himself, but we didn't know that at the time. Everyone was assuming it was a mass. I was walking back to my apartment just off campus when the notification went out that there were reports of gunshots and to get inside because campus was locking down. I finished walking home and turned on the news with some friends. I had other friends who were hiding in classrooms. The craziest part was the amount of misinformation going around on social media and in various group messages I was a part of. There were reports of more people shot and multiple shooters in a coordinated attack around various parts of campus and such. I'm not sure how much of that was fabricated maliciously and how much started with someone seeing a plainclothes officer with a gun or something and the story snowballing from there. I called my mom afterward and she started crying. She said she hadn't called me sooner because she didn't want my phone to ring in case I was in hiding. Survivor of the SHS shooting here. I was 9 at the time and in 4th grade. I was in the gym, and we were just going through the normal routine, i.e. the gym teacher explaining the activity and us participating. I remember it was rope climbing that day and I was so excited. All of a sudden we heard a loud bang noise, and everyone looked towards the door. At first we shrugged it off as the janitor dropping something in the hallway. But after the second and third bangs we were ushered into the corner and told to be very quiet while my teacher ran and locked the doors. We were confused but unbothered at first, but the longer it went on the more worried we became. The loudspeaker crackled on and we heard muffled voices and muffled bangs, then silence. Years later I was told it was our principal and the office staff trying to warn us, but were killed. By now we were all silently sobbing and holding hands. I remember being very scared but not entirely sure of what. Of course, a school shooting was not the first thing on our minds. Eventually my teacher told us to crawl across the floor and into a supply closet, where we sat terrified until SWAT and police officers opened the doors and helped us out. We went out one of the back doors and walked the drive to the firehouse, where our parents picked us up and took us home. That experience has changed me forever, and while the effects I had initially, nightmares, anxiety, etc., have lessened, I still feel them. I and many others suffer from PTSD, and I don't think a day goes by where I don't think about it. While I did not know everyone who passed personally, I have seen the toll it took on my community and feel for their families and friends deeply. Rip angels, you are loved. I also heard rumors that survivors were kinda getting harassed by other people, accusing them that the SHS shooting was a hoax and that survivors were getting badgered by these crazy people accusing them that it was all some staged media conspiracy. Have you had to deal with any people like that since? Anyone not believe you that the shooting happened? I find it absolutely crazy that people have the nerve to say it's fake to the face of a survivor. I live nearby in NY and my father used to work with the SHS shooter's dad. My dad told me that the FBI came to grab the shooter's father for questioning on the job, and my dad spoke with him that day as he was finding out what his son did. It was totally tragic. Yes, absolutely. And yes, it is as crazy as it sounds. Because I have become an advocate for common sense gun laws over the past couple of years, and because of the whole, totally nonsensical, conspiracy surrounding SH, I face plenty of opposition. I never mind a conversation, but I never engage with people who aren't civil. I have gotten screamed at, called names, explicit insults, crisis actor, act, and the most notable would be a fully grown man screaming at me at a rally, raving about how the shooting was a ploy by the government to take his God-given guns. People also frequently bring their guns, specifically rifles, to rallies and marches that I attend, I suppose with the intention of intimidating us, which makes me feel very unsafe. Besides the in-person stuff, I get a lot of online harassment as well, especially when I do interviews. In fact, I'm surprised nobody has commented anything here lol. This is a thread about experiences, so I don't mean to make it political, but these are the things I have experienced regarding my stance and my trauma. Thank you for asking in such a kind manner. I was a student at Virginia Tech during the 2007 massacre. I wasn't directly in the fire or anything, just a student in the dorms. It was very surreal. That morning my friends and I sat in the dorms watching the news evolve on campus. It started off saying 1 or 2 injured. At that point we didn't make too much of the situation. I remember the newscaster saying at one point that the new updates was over 20 fatalities, the final count was 32, and we all just froze. We assumed it was in error, it was not. As the day evolved we reached out to our friends to make sure they were okay, but cell service was very spotty. I had a very uneasy feeling that a somewhat peripheral friend of mine was in danger and tried to text her. It turns out she was shot but survived. Another of our friends was shot and killed. The next few days were strange. Classes were cancelled and many left the campus. President Bush came to speak to us, but I'm sure even he felt helpless with not much to contribute. Eventually, they cancelled the remainder of classes and exams for the semester and we left for the year. The summer was difficult. At my summer job, people kept trying to talk to me about the shooting, both co-workers and customers. I don't know why, but I felt okay discussing it with fellow VT students but nobody else, including my other friends and family. I eventually quit that job and got a new one, not telling anyone I was a VT student. Returning to school felt surreal. We did a lot of school spirit activities at football games, we are Virginia Tech, etc., but it was definitely a different atmosphere. I felt very uncomfortable in lecture halls and whenever my mind went blank I imagined a shooter coming in and killing us. That feeling still persists sometimes. In large groups I'll start thinking about a mass murder occurring. That day, I'll always say, is the day I grew from a child to adult. I changed in ways both positive and negative. I made new bonds with my fellow classmates but felt isolated from some other people. It was definitely the defining experience of my young adulthood. For a long time, I didn't want to talk about these experiences with anyone. Now, I try and speak more openly about it because I am trying to advocate for a better future. Just want to add that Levo Librescu held the fucking door while his students escaped. The shooter shot him through the door, but he wouldn't budge. All but one student escaped, the last one was afraid to jump and hesitated. Dude survived the Holocaust, survived the communist purges of Romania, died in statistically the safest mid-sized town in Virginia. And if you knew the guy, he was like 5 feet 4 inches at best. Tiny dude, probably 130 pounds but still a giant. Of the people mentioned in this post he was the only one I knew. His colleague Kevin Granata hid the students in his third-floor classroom in his office, also third floor, then he went down to the second floor to try and help. I heard he pulled a few people into the stairwell before being shot in the back. The shooter never stepped foot on the third floor. Jocelyn Couture Novak and Henry Lee died trying to barricade the door of their classroom. When the shooter forced his way in, Air Force Cadet Matthew Laporte charged straight at him. Too many people know the shooter's name, and too few know the heroes. I was around for Elliot Rogers' shooting at UCSP. There are a few things that I remember being surprising. 1. The sense of humor. This was not everyone, but I remember a couple people making finger gun gestures at each other. I think this is because the event lasted a while and spread over the Isla Vista area, so there was a general discomfort wherever you were. I think people were coping with the stress however you could. Gallows humor, basically. 2. The awkwardness of trying to console someone who just saw their friends shot or were shot at themselves. If you have ever been in a social situation where you didn't know what to say, add in the fact that whatever you say might permanently affect the life of the person you are talking to. 3. Your school is now famous for this. Although this was during a time that school shootings weren't super common, so that might be changing. I hope I'm not too late to get buried here. I was a first responder to Sandy Hook. I was a volunteer paramedic that worked 30+ miles from the school but was dispatched anyways regardless of the distance and response time because we were up next once the local EMS crews were out of service. If I had to describe the scene, I'd say life-altering. I thought I had EMS stories to make your skin crawl before Sandy, but now? I can't even come close. The screams of parents and teachers and other students are still burned into my mind. The visual scene? I couldn't close my eyes for weeks without seeing bodies. My short answer? You technically survived the shooting, in my case, the aftermath, but I'll never be the same. I think of myself as my name 2.0. My name 1.0 was pre-Sandy and 2.0 is after. I am a different person. I am still in weekly therapy and haven't made any drastic moves towards getting better. Even just seeing this question brought my stomach up to my throat. It's a part of me I'll never be able to explain to anyone that wasn't there, and I don't tell anyone that didn't know 1.0 me because it's too much to put on anyone. My thoughts are with anyone that was involved in a school shooting brave enough to post here. Peace be with you all. Edit, you're all too kind. I'm in a group with the rest of the first responders from that day and we work through everything together. I don't believe many of us, if any, are still actively volunteering in EMS as a result of this. Also, I am a lady. Smile. I go to Saugus High School and was at school during the most recent school shooting that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'll start from the beginning. I got to school at probably around 7:10 because I am Mormon, so I had a class called seminary, basically Bible study, and so we ended and I walked to school. I walked in and went towards the back of campus-ish, but I could still see where it took place in the quad. I'm just chilling there with my friends when I look over and see some kid walking really quickly towards the middle of the quad, and it happened so quickly. He was crying, I think. He ripped his backpack around and I just knew there something was wrong. He reached in and shot the girl in front of him. I won't say her name, but I knew her quite well, and she was instantly dead, I'm pretty sure. At that point I don't remember much. I just ran. And I ran and I ran and I ran until I collapsed on the sidewalk outside of school and some parent came and helped me up. Scariest moment of my life. I knew the kid that was the shooter. I knew the girl that died. I knew one of the injured. I'm still dealing with it today and it has honestly made me so scared. A chair fell and I just sat in my room for a couple hours. I hope no one ever has to deal with anything like that ever. Coming up on the 9th anniversary of a shooting that took place at my high school when I was a senior. A student that had been suspended earlier in the day returned to the school with his dad's handgun, went into the office of the vice principal that had suspended him and opened fire. He struck and killed the vice principal and critically injured the head principal who was responding to the sound of gunfire. The student fled the school and took his own life in a parking lot not far from the campus. I was in class at the time and an announcement came over the intercom that we were in a code red lockdown. Some students' teachers say they remember the announcement saying that it was not a drill, but I'm not really certain if that was included or not. My class locked the door, turned off the lights, and huddled in a corner, but I don't remember a feeling of fear or that the room was tense. We had had a couple of code yellows earlier in the year for small fights in the hallways, and code yellow red drills weren't uncommon, so the class felt more inconvenienced by the fact that we were just about to break for our lunch when the announcement was made than anything else. As we sat for longer without any update, a realization definitely began to come over the class that something more serious had happened, and we were all on our phones looking to get some idea of what was going on. This was before Twitter was super popular and there was a ton of confusion and misinformation going around from texts that people were getting from other students in the building and from family friends who were now watching the story develop on the news. We eventually received word that the school was going to be taken out of the code red and students' faculty would be released room by room and escorted out of the building by an armed police officer. We waited what felt like hours, we'd missed lunch and the room was restless, and finally received the knock on our door to indicate we were leaving. The officer walked us out the back of the school and through a parking lot that led to a church that neighbored the school. I met up with my parents and went home to watch my school on the news. Later that evening I went to dinner with some friends to just spend time with one another, and we got word while we were there that our vice principal had passed from her injuries. We finished our meal in silence, paid our check, and went to the school for a candlelight vigil. There had to have been 400 plus people with candles and homemade signs, and people just took turns praying and speaking to the crowd. Nothing planned or officially organized, just an opportunity for people to hurt together. It sounds cliché when people say I never thought it would happen here, but that really is the only response that makes sense after something like that happens. I remember an intense sadness in the days that followed and cried more than I ever had before or since. When I think back about that day, I like to remember the kindness of the community at the candlelight vigil and the posters of support from neighboring schools that lined the main hallway of the building for the next month. I went to school next to a school shooting. It was our sister school, so everyone from school A kinda knew everyone from school B. The morning it happened, I remember watching all the teachers in our back hallway gather around and huddle together. I made eye contact with one of them, who was visibly very distressed. I turned to the kid next to me and said something serious is happening, and he laughed and said I was paranoid. Turns out I wasn't. They didn't tell us anything. They tried to hide the whole fact, but since so many people had connections to the other school, we all found out quickly. We went on loose lockdown, so no going outside, which I still find odd, but whatever. 4 kids died. Personally, I wasn't in the shooting, but I am still a little shaken. That previous weekend, I met a kid who was very very cute and I was debating getting his number. I didn't because I was shy. But, the morning it happened, I was thinking of him and what if we had been texting and blah blah because I'm 14 and had major crushes. I came to find out he was one of the kids who died. That still kinda haunts me. I was in the Arapahoe High School shooting in 2013. The kid got kicked off the speech and debate team and decided to get revenge on the teacher. He bought a shotgun and went into the school on Friday the 13th. He fired 2 shots right off my hallway and killed a girl, who died after being in a coma for a couple of weeks. Then he went to the library, started a fire, and killed himself. I was in my science class right off the hallway. We were in the middle of a test and I, being the shit student I was, just wanted out. I was about to ask to go to the bathroom when I decided fuck it, I'll finish the test, then go home. 5 minutes later there was a gunshot. The first thing that crossed my mind was that a janitor was removing one of those giant-ass wooden doors and accidentally dropped it, slapping it against the ground. Students looked back and forth nervously. Then a second shot went off. My teacher went out into the hallway, and a minute later returned to the room and told us to get into lockdown. I guess he saw the smoke in the stairwell and saw what happened in that hallway. Before long we were all crammed into the corners behind the big lap tables. I was sitting in the middle of the classroom, so I was one of the last kids to get to a spot, so I was basically sitting out in the middle of the room hiding behind a trash can. The whole time my teacher, a massive slab of muscle, was upright right next to one of the 2 doors ready to fuck up anyone that might walk in. We were in lockdown a good 3 minutes before the announcement even happened. We sat there for what felt like hours before the fire alarm went off. I'm assuming this was the fire started in the library. Then even longer and we began hearing voices down the hallway. My teacher looked right to me, in the middle of the room, with a nervous look in his eyes. Finally, cops SWAT showed up. They tried the door and my teacher jumped and looked at me again, who was giving a violent nod and a thumbs up. They cleared the hallway before asking us to open the door. We all got pat down upon exiting, and sat out in the cold on the track field for a couple of hours before being bussed off to a local church. I remember texting my parents and sister that I loved them, and funnily enough I remember making jokes to my mom, cause I bet which was pretty fucking scared. For the rest of the month we had a long winter break. When we all got back things seemed really cool, everyone was closer to each other and supportive. As the year went on things went back to normal, the usual bullying and other shit, so I went to online school. Ask any questions you have. Edit, being in Colorado, where there was Columbine and Aurora. I now don't like going places with big crowds, especially protests or anything of the sort. Also, before you click this link, do me a favor and don't remember the shooter's name, don't look at his picture, don't give him that honor. He was troubled and I feel bad for him. https, edit 2, I remember afterwards while we were waiting to be bussed off, everyone was speculating who it was. They were speculating this one kid I knew and got along with pretty well. He was a weird kid but lots of fun. I remember thinking it was shitty, all of a sudden everyone wasn't surprised it might be him because of the way he was treated. After school was back on, everyone was suddenly nice to this kid. They knew it was because they didn't wanna be the next target. To the high school kids that might be reading this, you know that one quiet awkward kid that sits in your class? Don't be nice to him because you're afraid of what he'll do if he snaps. Be nice to him because we all need that in our life. After all, we're all stuck on this rock hurtling through space, so just be fucking pleasant to one another. Start a conversation, ask about hobbies, be a good person. Edit 3, think of a person right now, any person. Now send that person a text. How are you doing lately? Now listen to what they have to say and offer support. Be there for the people you know. I was in the STEM shooting. We heard 5 shots and sat in a corner for a little while, then some yelling. I heard some guy moaning, in pain, outside, then a bullet came through the wall and scratched my friend. We left to another corner, then there were 2 more shots. I was texting friends and family and my friend texted me, wanna play 8-ball pool. The cops removed us, there was blood in the halls, we stood around in the cold for a couple hours. A friend of mine got shot in the leg 3 times, though she's okay now, both of them are. After I was kinda messed up a few days after, which is kinda weird because of how close I was, but I don't wanna sound bad, but I'm fine now, just like completely desensitized.
Powerful happiness that I just can't seem to guide.